Good evening, and how is everyone doing this fine evening? So, tonight's show, we're going to sit down and talk with Tom Schmidt. He is part of the Wisconsin Fiero Fanatics, and you may know of his car as the Rattler. So, we're going to sit down, talk with him, and see what stories he has. I'm your host, Mike Croyer, and you are listening to the newest episode of Fiero Cast, the only podcast dedicated to the Pontiac Fiero. So, welcome everyone. And again, our guest for tonight is Tom Schmidt. You can find past Fiero Cast episodes at FieroFocus.com or on our Facebook page. So sit back, relax, let's start those engines, and here we go. All right, so again, Tom Schmidt, thank you for joining me tonight. It is an honor. I'm glad you're able to join us on FieroCast. So let's get started. So
my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Not a problem. I'm glad that we can get this done and trying to kind of open it up to see what other areas and people that I can talk to. And you were top on the list, so.
Well, thank you for the honor.
Oh, thank you. So how long have you been involved with the Fieros?
I've been involved with the Fieros since I bought it brand new in 1986 as a company car. And at that point in time, believe it or not, a company car. At that time, I ran it until 1992, roughly. And then I bought a different car for a company car. So then I decided to turn it into a race-prepared, custom-modified show car. And that's where it started.
Real quickly, going back to it being a company car, did they consider it a company car because back then it was classified as an economy car that got great gas mileage?
Well, what happened there was it was my choice to decide what kind of car I wanted in my territory as a sales manager at the time. And so I decided, well, let's try a Fiero because it is a nice compact car and gets me around what I want to do. And so I decided to take a Fiero, and that's the start of it. And I been using it ever.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
As a sales territory that I had, which covered about 36 square miles. That's not a lot, but the car performed fine and everything. It just was a car that I chose at the time, and that's how it turned out.
Was it comfortable? Was it a car back then that you felt comfortable in to drive as a sales car? You know, was it something that you could see as your economy car that was, like I said, was comfortable enough to where if you were putting long hours of the day in it, was it a car that you can be comfortable in during those times?
Well, actually, yes, because I was always in and out of cars talking to clients, of course. And so I wasn't stuck in the car all day long at anything like that. So it was a case of, as a sales rep or so, called us district managers at the time. Nice title, by the way. It was something where I would go around in my area, and I was selling heating and air conditioning at the time, furnaces for Lennox Industries, very well-known name. And I'd make my appointments and talk to my clients and set up a time and date to speak with them and do the sales pitch and measure everything I'd had to do for the heating and the air conditioning components, and get in the car and go on to the next stop. So it wasn't like I was in the car all day long. So as far as the seats go, were the seats were quite comfortable actually. So I had no problem with that.
Were some of the clients surprised that you were showing up in a Fiero? Did a lot of them know what that was, or did a lot of people confuse them and think it was a Corvette?
No, I had really no actual problems with anybody questioning the car that I was driving at the time, because before that, as a sales district manager, I had a Jaguar XKE coupe, and I was confined in a very high class area in the north side of Milwaukee. So I would drive up to customers at that time, which was back in the late 60s, early 70s, and with his Jaguar. People, of course, kind of questioned that a little bit because they thought, well, he must be a very successful salesman in order to drive a Jaguar for a sales car, which I was at the time. But as far as the Fiero goes, no, nobody ever questioned or anything. I just they liked the car, and I asked questions about it. And at that point in time, I started describing the car, and that's the way it went.
Very cool. So after the time was up, as far as it being a company car, was it offered to you to keep, or was it something that you approached them and said, do you mind if I keep the car on a personal level?
No, what happened there was, in this case, when the car was bought, it was bought with the company money as a you might call it an expense account. And when I retired from the company in 2003, I had already paid that car off, and they just let me have it. So they said, just take it. And the title went in my name, and they said, do what you want with the thing. So that's fine. They didn't want to take it back. So, and at that time, I didn't have an awful lot of miles on it, probably about 70 or 80,000 at the most. So I just kept the car and started modifying it from that point on.
What was it about the car that you wanted to keep it versus, wanting just to go ahead and get another car?
I think at that time, probably, I was very personally involved with the car, thinking of what I would do with it in the future after I retired from my job. And I grew personally, very personal with the car. And I thought, hey, this is really a neat car. So I'm just going to preserve it the best I can, and maybe someday show it and modify it and then do what I wanted to do with it, like I did all my other cars at the time. I did the same with my Jaguars too, by the way. I started out with a race car in 1959. It was Jim Jeffords' old race car that he used at Elkhart Lake. And when I traded that in for the XKE, the E-type coupe, there again, I thought, well, maybe I could keep this car and maybe I can do what I wanted to do with it. But at that point in time, I decided not to do that. So the same thing happened with the Fiero. I decided to just preserve it the best I can. I just fell in love with the car. And my wife fell in love with the car. She says, why do you want to sell that thing? It's really a nice car. And maybe we can have some fun with it, which then turned out to be another facet in my very unusual life that I lead in the first place, with my music and my horses and my guns and my fishing and golfing and hunting and everything else that I do. I'm going to be 85 years old, so I might as well take advantage of doing what I want to do with that thing. So I started to modify the car in 1995, roughly. The first thing I did with the car in 95 was to put the megaphones on the back and raise the wing up on the back of the car. And they started showing the car in that configuration until I started going on to the other stuff that I do, which obviously is a unusual car. It's kind of a unique thing that I did with it, but that's what I did with it, just to enjoy the car and have people enjoy the car, and the kids love the car, and that's the way it went.
Nice. Well, we'll get into more of that modifications and everything that you did on the car in a little bit, but
Sure.
What keeps you active in the Fiero community and with your Fiero?
Activity is part of my life. Unfortunately, maybe fortunately, but I just enjoy showing the car all around the country, all around the Midwest, and do whatever I do with it. And my satisfaction in doing that is having people enjoy the car, and especially the young kids come around. Of course, they like that Back to the Future looking thing that I do with the back of the car with those velocity stacks. They go, oh, that's a Back to the Future car, my lord. And I've got several trophies at home from shows that I've done up here that I've had kids' people's choice car because of that fact. And I just enjoy showing the car, and I created the car for people to enjoy. That's my satisfaction, having people enjoy my car like you do with yours.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing that, I've always said. The Fiero is, for me, it's a love-hate relationship because
Oh, yeah.
I love the car so much. I love working on it. I love driving it and doing shows and cruise nights. But then when something goes wrong, I just can't stand it.
Yes, I know what you mean. It happened to me up at the Dells it's 3 weeks ago, by the way. I lost my overdrive, and the torque converter switch let go on it, and luckily the Prez was there, and he pulled that switch out for me, and it's just been running ever since without it on. So I just lose about 200 or 300 RPMs on the engine, but he says just leave it the way it is. It's not going to affect the car at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it happens regularly on Fieros, apparently.
Yeah.
It just stopped in the middle of the Dells, right in the middle of the Dells at about 5 o'clock on June 3rd. And it wouldn't start, wouldn't do nothing. I let it set for a few minutes, and the thing actually then started. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do with this thing? A flatbed at home, or what I should do? Well, that was the weekend of the Chula Vista Dells run. And so we went over to dinner with the president. He says, oh, I can fix that for you real easy. He says, oh, okay, thank you. Pulled out a screwdriver, went down in there in the torque converter and pulled out the switch. And he says, don't worry about a thing anymore. It's just going to run the way it is. You just lose 200 or 300 horsepower and it'll run just fine. It happens all the time on Fieros. It's like, oh my God, was I lucky. And that's what happened. So anyways, that's the hate part of it.
Exactly.
Of course, there's, like you said, there's a love-hate relationship with the car anyways,
Yep.
And you learn to live with it just like anything else in life, I guess.
Yep. So we're going to take a quick little break, but when we come back, you touched on some of your other hobbies, so we're going to kind of dive into that collection. So we'll be right back. We know how hard it is to find Fiero parts. We also know that as years go by, finding parts isn't going to get any easier. The big box stores will never make new Fiero parts because our community is just too small. This is why we need to support the companies that support us. For nearly 30 years, the Fiero store has sponsored our club events, provided free technical support, and produced well over 150 exclusive parts that no big box store would even consider. So, next time you need Fiero parts, head over to thefierostore.com and browse through thousands of products that are specifically designed for your Fiero. That's fierostore.com, the world's largest source of Fiero parts. All right, we are back. We are talking with Tom Schmidt. So you touched a little bit on some of your other hobbies besides the Fiero. You got your music, you got your horses, you've got guns, and you've got your racing hobby as well. So let's start with the guitar. Tell us a little bit about that hobby and how you got involved with that. And you performed at a lot of places and have performed, and I'm blanking on her name, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you
it's Nora Collins,
a young country star singer as well.
Yes. Well, let me get started with that first of all. I started playing guitar in 1951, which is 70 years ago, by the way.
Wow.
And it was a Spanish type guitar. And I heard some music on the radio at the Grand Ole Opry on a Saturday night one time, and they had a slide guitar on there, which is a resophonic type guitar. And I said, that's the sound I want to do. And that was in 1953. I found one in a pawn shop for $20. That guitar is priceless today. I played that on the Grand Ole Opry package shows here in the Midwest, and all around the United States. I had played that guitar up till about the year 2000, and then I started buying more custom-made resonator guitars. Right now, I got 5 of them. So I was performing regularly from 1954 through 2010, performing on stage and
Wow.
doing recording artists, recording sessions, and stage shows, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a wild time in my life for doing that kind of thing, but that's what I did, So, and I also played pedal steel guitar for 55 years as well, in country bands and country rock bands, things like that. That's another hobby that I was interested in. As far as guitars go, I could play a little mandolin once in a while, sometimes banjo, but I specialize in the Resophonic guitars.
Very cool. Now, is that the one that it's, again, I could be wrong. It's basically a hollow center and it almost looks like a tin dome over there with
Oh,
cutouts?
I'll explain that to you a little bit. It's like having a, how would you call it? It's like having a speaker system in a guitar. So there's a metal cover on the top. There's a cone inside that's attached to a spider that is in a sound well. It's a round circle, about 10 1/4 inches in diameter. And that amplifies the sound mechanically rather than electrically. And they started doing that in the late 1920s. And it's at that time was an innovation because you could not hear the regular type guitars in a band because they weren't loud enough. And these project the sound about 1.5 times louder than a normal guitar. And it's gone on to become very, very popular now with bluegrass and country groups and things like that, Americana type music. So that's the way that started out.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So you also have a hobby with horses, and you go out to Colorado once or twice a year, correct?
That's true. Yeah. Or 3 times if we can. We have 2 horses out there. My daughter takes care of them on her ranch out there in Elizabeth, Colorado, which is a cow town. They got gravel roads and longhorn steers and everything else out there. Another really weird type of my life, but I've loved horses ever since 1962 when I went to a dude ranch with my kids out in Colorado, and they fell in love with them. And the rest is history on that. But I have a thoroughbred and a quarter horse.
Wow.
And now it's the quarter horse is actually a show horse, which we just got out of Florida last year. And that's been on a show circuit for quite a number of years. It's about 17 years old, and the horses are another favorite hobby of mine. I've loved horses ever since I was a kid, actually. So I've been riding since 1950, roughly. So I enjoy going out to Colorado and riding the horses. And we go on trails and stuff like that, and we have the 2 horses, and that's another facet of one of my life hobbies.
Yeah. Well, there's actually, quite a few people that have got horses. Jen Goss has got some horses too.
Yes.
My grandparents had a couple of horses, and I had a opportunity to ride on them. And but for me, when I was young, it was kind of a fear because I was fine if they were just kind of walking, but once they started doing the trotting and then a little bit faster, I kind of got a little scared.
Well,
And then,
that stuff happens, unfortunately, and everybody has to remember that a horse has a mind of its own.
yep.
And you have to be the master of the horse, or he's going to be the master of you. So you
Mhm.
got to be careful. Always be cautious on a horse. It's like anything else. They're
scare
very
them.
unpredictable,
Yep.
So
Yeah, and then the only ranch that I've been to is, you may have heard of this one, the Flying W Ranch in
yeah,
Colorado Springs.
Yes, I know it. We used to go down there for their cookouts. They always
Yeah.
had cookouts out there, and they used to serve them on tin plates
Mm-hmm.
and country style steak and all that stuff out there at the Flying W. I remember that
Yep.
very well in Colorado Springs. Yeah, we've been there. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if it's still there or not.
It's a fun place. I
Yeah.
hope next time we when we were out there, I think it was 2018, 2019. I think it was
Mm,
2019. They were still in the process of rebuilding because they had that massive wildfire that came through.
right. Yes.
But
Yeah, I remember.
I believe they just reopened 100% late last year. So
Interesting. Very
yeah.
interesting.
So I think next time we go out there, I think we're gonna take the kids there because it's a fun place.
Well, they got great food and they have entertainment there and nice country band to play and all that
Hmm.
stuff, and they serve everything on tin plates. I remember that. So,
I've got now that you mentioned the music, I've got three of their CDs.
well, that's cool. Excellent.
So it sounds like you're also now when you mentioned guns and fishing, is that part a hobby of hunting?
No, actually, I collect antique firearms. Most of them are percussion cap revolvers. I have a pretty good arsenal of about maybe 10 or 12 guns that I've collected over the years, like Walker Colts
Mm-hmm.
and Winchester 1866 30-30 carbines. And so I got about probably 10 different types of antique firearms that I have here and holsters to match. And it's a hobby I've had since 1964, roughly.
So would those be considered like cowboy guns?
Some of them are hunting guns too. I used shotguns that I have out in South Dakota when I was hunting in South Dakota back in 65 through 1972. And for pheasants, we went out for pheasants at the time. And I have two special custom made shotguns for that were made in Italy. And that was a fun time of my life when I was hunting. I haven't done that for many years. I also got into fly fishing.
I heard that's really hard.
And it's another science and another what would you call it? Another specialty thing as far as fishing goes. Fly fishing in Colorado and Wyoming and that kind of stuff. I did that. And as far as golf goes, I used to play golf a lot, maybe once or twice a week when I was younger. And those are some more hobbies that I've had over the years. Like I said, it's getting to be the sunset of my life here, so I gotta cut back on some of this stuff. But I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna keep rolling along.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my internet writing for different magazines that I do for the sports car racing magazines. I've been published many, many times on articles that I've done in my life as far as being on racing teams and things like that, which is another subject to get onto sometime.
Well, some of your articles, people can find them on the Midwest Fiero Club's website, and that's at www.midwestfieroclubs.aaca.com. And
Right.
you can find that under, was it Tom's Corner?
That's correct. Tom's Corner was originally made out on that website by Jeff Jones at the time. I don't know if Jason Foley is doing any of that anymore, but I know the last one I wrote was on the 35th anniversary show when I had my air conditioning replaced. I went from R12 to R134, but it's a story in itself. That was one of the Tom's Corners articles, but
I think Rob Bartlett has been updating that, and I believe that article is up there.
Oh, okay. Well, I have more of them to go. If they ever want me to submit some, I do it all the time with other car clubs, So
yeah, I would say just send them to Rob, and we'll he'll get those up on the website because those are interesting articles. They're they're interesting stories, and they're also kind of a how-to as well. So,
correct. Yes. Anything else as far as anything on my car that you'd like to know about, or anything like?
Yeah. We're just getting started.
Oh, we are. Okay. That's fine.
So the other big hobby that I've noticed and seen is your auto racing. Kind of give us a little bit of background of what you've driven, what tracks you've been on, when you started, and some of the, like I said, some of the cars that you've talked about in the past and are just, cars that people would just die to drive just once in their lifetime.
Started with Ferraris, of all
See?
things.
I
But
probably, whenever we get behind the steering wheel of a Ferrari.
I've done 4 or 5 of them in my life. So,
Wow.
but I'll get started on the racing thing. And it's going to take a few minutes to do this for you, if you don't mind, because
Yeah.
it all started in 1947 when I was listening to the Indy 500 on the radio. And my father at the time, and who's not alive now, but he took me to midget races at State Fair Park on Friday nights. And I had a soapbox racer car at that time. And I had my own goggles, and my friend was pushing me around the subdivisions in the neighborhoods and all that stuff. And in 1949, I got into outboard races at Phantom Lake, where I was living at the time. And I helped the driver get his engine started. And that started me in the boat racing thing. And in 1952, I bought a racing boat, W410, with a 25 horsepower engine on it on Lake Beulah. And I was primarily a lake racer at the time. And I was racing other boats on the lake at that time. And in 1954, a friend of mine, and we were in high school at the time, we would go over to the local foreign car dealership to look at the MGs and the Porsches and the Austin Healey's and stuff like that, and saying, "Oh man, Jaguars too! Wow, one day maybe I can get one of those someday." Well, as it turned out, in 1956, I was going to sports car races at State Fair Park and the Milwaukee Mile, and Jim Jeffords was driving a Jaguar 120 MC there at the time, and with my high school pals, and I thought, man, I'd like to have that car someday. Well, in 1958, we all went up to Elkhart Lake and saw the same cars up there. And at the time, I was with Paid Oil Company, and I was a fuel and lubricant specialist for them for the USAC stock cars and the sports cars. I was mixing nitromethane with methanol at the time using a hydrometer for checking for specific gravity. And I did that for 10 years, actually, for the Enco brand. Well, in 1959, the fall of 59, I bought that Jaguar 120 MC race car, and I decided, well, I'm gonna keep this car for a while, and I'm gonna show it, and I'm gonna drive it, I'm gonna do all kinds of things that I can do with it. And I started getting into competition with other drivers up at Lindale Farms in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. That's a race course up there at the time. And then in 1962, I entered that car in a car show here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I won first place in the competition sports category. And I added a roll bar to it and custom exhausts, megaphones on the back, just like you see on the Fiero, actually. Mm-hmm. They had cutouts on them so I could run them through the exhaust system or straight through unplugged if I wanted to. Kind of a neat idea, actually.
Very cool.
I got that idea from a Maserati Tipo 62, which was a rear engine 12-cylinder car that I saw up at Elkhart Lake. And the megaphones gave me that idea. Well, what happened after that was in 1963, my uncle had a Ferrari 265 GTB 4 cam and a 330 GT 2+2 and a Lamborghini 400 GT. He let me drive all those cars because I had my Jaguar at the time. So if you can drive it, you can drive a Ferrari, man. Okay, fine. Kind of cool. And in 1964, I was at Road America 500. We run the Road America 500 when I was on the racing team there with the John Meekum team with a Ferrari 275 LM with Augie Pabst and Walt Hanskin driving. And I was in charge of the fuel and castor oil combinations for the transmission and stuff like that. In 1965, I entered my Jag 120 in competition at Lindale Farms, and I've won several trophies with that car. And that was an interesting time in my life. And in 1965, I was also with a Mecum team with Mark Donahue. You might have heard of him.
Yeah.
Maybe you're into race cars. He had a Lola T170, Lola T70 that he drove at Elkhart Lake. And in 1968, I sold a 120 MC and I bought the E-Type Jag. And in 1970, I started getting into outboard racing engines again, the alcohol burning type, at the Badger State Outboard Association. And I sold the E-Type and got into outboards really heavy in 1972 when I bought a unlimited hydroplane with a 65 horsepower Mercury engine that went 101.664 miles an hour on water. And unfortunately, my wife got a little scared of that one because she said, you better get rid of that or you're going to kill yourself. Well, unfortunately, I had to sell it. So in 1980, I started attending more outboard races and I started to get into the alcohol burning engines at the time. And in 1986, I bought the Fiero, of course. That was May 15th of 1986. I bought that car. I'm the original owner of that car, by the way.
Very cool.
And that's what I did as a company car. And in 1989, I attended an outboard race in Burlington, Wisconsin, and I heard about a guy by the name of O.F. Christner. And I decided to write a book about his engines, which are called the Quincy Loop racing engines. They're alcohol burning engines. And at that time, it took me 4 years to research all the information I needed to get that book together, which is on the internet, by the way, under the official Quincy Looper Racing Outboards. If you look at it on Google, you can find it. And that book that I wrote actually was instrumental in getting him inducted into the American Powerboat Association Honor Squadron, which is the highest honor you can get for racing boats. And in 1992, then I started to modify the Fiero for racing and shows and things like that. I had the megaphones in the back and a raised wing, and I put the wing on the front of the car. You might have remembered that. Mm-hmm. And then I got to do the shows, and my first show was in 1995 at Chula Vista, and I won first place over there at that with that. And I kept modifying the car, and then just did all kinds of car shows at the time. I'm reading some of this off on my script here, so I don't lose it. In 1996, I added the Velocity Stacks, which is the signature look of the car, and added the NASCAR spoiler at the time. And I won my first national class from the old Facoa cars at Indianapolis that year. And then in the year 2000, I drove NASCAR's Nextel Cup cars in competition with 30 other drivers at Lowe's Motor Speedway in North Carolina, and achieved 165 miles an hour with my number 8 Dale Earnhardt Jr. Club car that he used. It was sponsored by Lennox Industries at the time. And then the year after that, I went over to the Chicagoland Speedway and did the same thing at 151 miles an hour for 30 laps with 30 other drivers. And in 2003, I drove my cousin's Corvette at Elkhart Lake at 172 miles an hour. Wow. And that was the fastest speed I ever drove a car. And
does that scare you at all?
No, I was getting kind of used to it at the time because I also drove open wheel race cars up at Elkhart Lake and the Skip Barber Racing School. I did that up there too. And that was a Formula Dodge car. I went 130 miles an hour, and that is more scary than actually driving the big Corvette because it's an open wheel car. You know, when you're going that fast in an open wheel car, you know you're going fast. You know. Yeah. In the meantime, after that, continue to modify the Fiero, and I put like I said, the roll bar in, the fire bottle, all the other stuff. In 2006, I entered all kinds of car shows, winning awards all over the place, and I joined N.I.F.E, of course, and I'm a treasurer of the Midwest Fiero Clubs as a charter member of that organization. In 2007, I changed the graphics on the car and recurved the velocity stacks. And they're called reverse hood scoops, and they do what they're supposed to do. They let all the hot air out of the engine compartment. Actually, they actually are functional. Most people don't know that, but they are. And I added the Rattler logo to the car in 2010 and changed the image of the car and the displays. And then I joined AACA, of course, when Fred Bartemeyer decided he wanted to get the MFC into the AACA, which I still am the treasurer for part of that club too, not the anniversary club, but the MFC treasurer club. And you know about that because you send me all the information. And I've been published in many magazines and all this stuff. And the tracks that I've driven on, if you're interested in knowing that, I got that here. If you're still interested, the car was entered at Lowe's Motor. No, at Lowe's Motor Speedway, I drove the Nextel cars, the stock cars. I also drove at Road America, Elkhart Lake with my cousin's car. I drove that track several times as well. I drove at Gateway International in St. Louis. I drove Pomona, the dragway over at Pomona, California, in a rear engine dragster. I drove the Milwaukee Mile in Wisconsin. I drove Michigan International in Brooklyn, Michigan. I drove the Chicagoland Speedway in Joliet. I drove the Rockford Speedway in Rockford, Illinois as well. So those are some of the tracks I was at. And as far as the acknowledgments, as far as what I've had, as far as my national class champions with the car, Indianapolis, of course, in 1996, runner-up national champ in 97 at Columbus, Ohio, national champion FECO in Louisville, Kentucky, 99, national class champion in Collinsville, Illinois in 2000, national class champion FECO at Osage Beach, Missouri in 2001, national class champion runner-up in Pontiac, Michigan, 2008, national class champion runner-up Indianapolis, 2013, national class champion, second runner-up in East Peoria. That was the last one. And then, of course, I'm five-time class winner World of Wheels runner at International Show Car Association in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Some of those are some of the highlights I have, and I've done a best of show in St. Louis, Missouri in 1998, best of show in modified in Davenport, Iowa in 2009, and best of show and modified in St. Charles, Illinois in 2018. So, and of course, the car is on the honor roll and at the roll, what's that called? The Hall of Champions over there in N.I.F.E.
Yeah. Yep.
You got that? Yeah. So that's some of the stuff I've done with it. As far as modifications on the car, I got over 20 modifications on that car. I got a whole list of them here if you want them, but I don't know if we got time for that.
Oh yeah, we always have time. But
well,
real quick,
interesting
going
stuff.
back to the racing, what would you say was your most favorite car that you were able to drive over the years?
I think the most favorite car to drive was probably the Corvette, only because it's the fastest and the loudest and the hottest car I ever drove. Second one would be the Dale Earnhardt Jr. car at Lowe's Motor Speedway in Charlotte, North Carolina. And by the way, Lennox Industries sponsored me at that time and paid all the expense to fly out there, drive the cars, fly back, hotel, meals, everything else. And the same happened at Chicagoland Speedway the year after that. So I've got plaques and I've got diplomas and all kinds of stuff from all the races I've been in, stuff like that. So thought you might be interested in that.
Oh, yeah. So
it's an interesting life, believe me.
You very interesting life. Very full life.
Well, that's good.
So when you say you had the most enjoyable was the Corvette based on the speed and the handling and stuff like that, do you have any desire to see what the new Corvette can do on a track?
I probably would if I had the opportunity to do that, but being 85 years old almost, I don't know if I really want to get into that anymore. I'm kind of, I've had my fill of that kind of stuff, and I would still like to do it, yes, but whether that opportunity would ever come up, I have no idea. But it would be fun to try.
Very
cool. A couple of things I would do is I got a couple other things on my bucket list, like get in an open cockpit biplane, a steerman, and fly around in an open cockpit biplane. I have not done that yet, which is unusual. But a couple other things, but we're still alive and kicking at it, doing what we have to do.
That's the big news there. Yeah, have fun while you're still there. You right?
You're right. Exactly right. I enjoy being in the different organizations too, by the way, because AACA is a very good organization. I, of course, am part of the Midwest Fiero Clubs, the N.I.F.E organization. I'm in with the Haggerty Drivers Club. I'm in that. I'm in Fiero Fanatics Car Club, of course, and also with just last year I went in with the Mid-Atlantic Fiero Owners Association with Jen Goss's group up there, because they're a very active group up there as well. So
yeah, very active.
And as far as the activity goes, this is good because whenever I can get out and do things and I can write about them and I can send them to different magazines, they're more than happy to publish them, And in this case here, by putting articles in their magazines, it's called a Fiero Pride magazine, by the way. They like that because they're getting a feel for what's happening out in the Midwest, and they are a part of the Midwest Fiero Clubs now, by the way, as you know. But they like articles from different areas of the country and different clubs to see what they're doing that they may want to try to do on their own sometime. And that's the reason I do that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
And I've got the time to do it, which is fine, So I know Jim Hallman asked me to do an article on the Dells run this last 3 weeks ago, which I sent to him already.
Yep,
and he's going to edit that.
It's already ready to be printed. We got I believe we just got a few minor things to tweak, and then it'll be heading off to the printer next week. So,
well, excellent. Well, yeah, he asked me to do that. I'm very happy to do that for him because we're very close, by the way. And Jenny and Ann are extremely close, and we enjoy doing your show every year. We've done your show for so many years I can't even count them anymore. So. We'll be back down there again in September. So
nice. So we're going to take a quick little break, and we're actually going to hear about the Midwest Fiero Clubs. And when we come back, we're going to jump into the Rattler and kind of pick your brain on what you've done with that. So,
all right.
We'll be right back. Have you asked yourself, what is the Midwest Fiero Clubs? Well, the Midwest Fiero Clubs, which is also a region of the AACA, is a dedicated group of enthusiasts whose passion is to promote and preserve the Pontiac Fiero and the Fiero community. The Midwest Fiero Clubs consists of members from existing Fiero clubs across the U.S. The Midwest Fiero Club's intent is to support member clubs and promote the Fiero-related events that they offer. The intent is to enable enthusiasts to discover events in their areas other than their own, and to warrant participation. This has created a tighter-knit Fiero community of the owners and created some great regional shows that may not have otherwise happened. So, how do I find out about them? You can visit the website at midwestfieroclubs.aaca.com or just Facebook them at Midwest Fiero Clubs, AACA, and like them. All right. Welcome back. Again, we're talking with Tom Schmidt. So after you took possession of the car, after it was the company car, what was the first thing that you wanted to do to personalize the car at the time, and when did you come up with the name the Rattler?
Okay. The first thing I did to the car was put the megaphones on the back. Ferrari type megaphones on the back for the exhaust system.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 1990, 19, I think 1992 or thereabouts.
So
After
was the car basically stock from the time you took full possession of it till that first modification?
it was stock up to a point because when I bought the car, I had the Y99 rally suspension put in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and I added a couple other things at the dealership when I bought the car. Whatever came with the car, like, of course, air conditioning, and I had of all things, a rear window defogger, which I never used. But otherwise, the engine was a 2.8 liter, just a regular transverse V6 engine, That was the first thing I did with a car. Second thing I did with a car is I went to IRM, which was out east, and got some wing stands to raise the wing from the 3 inches or whatever it is up to the 9-inch level.
Mm-hmm.
That was the second thing I did with the car. I did a couple other things, like I had a Holly air scoop with it, and I put the sprint racing headers on it from the Fiero store, and I added the rear sway bar at the bottom. I added the top sway bar at the front. At the top sway bar at the engine, in the engine compartment. I put the rear spoiler on it and things like that. But that all happened in a progression of events that I wanted to do to personalize the car.
Kind of sounds like with me, I usually, when I kind of come up with an idea, it's usually during the year, and during the off season between that, November through March, April is when I usually do my modifications, just because it gives you time to look at it, and I usually try to do at least one big project a year. It's not a reverse swing, the splitter on the front of the car, functional splitter. So I've got the little struts that come down and attached it to the bottom. So you don't see much of those on a coupe, and I saw a couple of them and like, you know what, that's really cool. Even though my car is not really a race car, but it kind of enhances the look a little bit if you can do it right. And I remember you had one on there, but I don't remember why you took it off.
Well, there's a story on that. I'll tell you about it. It's kind of interesting, actually, in a way. We were doing your show down there in Oak Brook, Illinois. This is a while back. Your Fiero show, and I had a front wing built for that car. Bob Feistel Racing built that one. He also built my roll bar too, by the way.
Mm.
And I had Heim joints, which connected past the radiator to put that wing on the front, which I could raise and lower it up and down and sideways. And it was a very unusual wing at the time. Very unusual. And when I was done with the show down there in Illinois, I went over a curb with it and I bent the front wing.
Ooh.
So I had to take it off. Some of our members from Wisconsin came and picked me up, took the car. We left the car there, and they took all the stuff out of the car because I couldn't drive it at the time. And that was the end of that wing. We decided not to rebuild it or anything because it was too costly. It was a very expensive wing to start with. It's all aluminum, and it was just a custom wing, So I know what wings are like. But I went and started going into things, do other things with the car. So.
Yeah, I think the one that really just stands out, that everybody, like you said, just it's they know as soon as they see that car are the stacks. And
Yeah.
You said they're functional, and you said you've changed them a couple times. What was the change that you made from the originals to the current style?
That happened in Osage Beach, Missouri, by the way, at a FACOA show down there, one of the national shows down there. Maybe you remember that or not. I don't know if you did. Um, I had them set straight up. All six were straight up at the time to catch the air off the top of the roof of the car, which would then act like as a chimney to pull air out of the engine compartment as a low pressure area. So I was talking to Phil Hoff about that. And he said, well, with a low pressure area in the back of your car past the window there, it would be better if you recurved them so that you pull more air out and the low pressure area will continue to move the air out. So what happened was when I first put those on, I got 6 holes in the deck lid that go down into the engine, obviously, it's straight through. Mm-hmm. So that they actually are functional and they do pull the air out. So I decided to change that out about year 2003, 2004, whatever I said. And that's how they ended up being recurved at the time.
Do you notice on your temp gauge that it sits lower because the engine's cooler?
I think it sits a little lower, but I can feel it when I go out and put my hand inside those stacks. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of hot air in there, so I know they're really working. I tell people don't go near there because they're almost as hot as the exhaust megaphones.
Wow.
So they are pulling air out. So the air comes across the front of the car, underneath the car, and then there's a splitter underneath the car, as you know where that engine thing is.
Yep.
It's a like an air dam underneath the car that brings the air up through the engine compartment and then out through the stacks and then out. Yeah, there's a splitter underneath your car. It's a little lip. It's probably about an inch or you'll be able to see it if you look under the car. If you got one under there, it's like almost like part of the firewall. And
as the air comes through, it just the force of basically it's like a vacuum and it just sucks all that air out.
Pulls the air out. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what early on when I first met you and you said, this is my car, this is, it's nicknamed the Rattler. I'm not going to lie. I thought you named it the Rattler because when you were driving it, it shook and I was like, how can somebody drive a car and name a car the Rattler if they can't kind of control it straight and stop the rattling? And I'm like, that just must really be annoying. But what was the main reason behind naming it the Rattler? And
I'll give you a clue on that. First of all, it was called a cyborg at first. Cyborg. Cyborg. Why was it called a cyborg? Well, because it was half man and half machine. That's the definition of a cyborg. Mm-hmm. The car is the machine. I'm the man. So I always
there you go.
It was kind of a neat. I had a license plate that said that even. So then after about 2010, every time I got that car starting up in the subdivision, somebody came up to me and said, that thing is really loud. What are you doing to that thing? All the windows in the subdivision are rattling when you start it up. Oh, you're rattling the windows in this subdivision, eh? Okay. I'm going to call the car the Rattler. Well, then I went into a magazine that I had here, and you've heard of Cobras and you've heard of Vipers and you've heard of all that kind of stuff. There's no car that was a Rattler, but I found one in Texas that was called a Rattler because it had one of those Mercury engines that we talked about before.
Yeah.
The Quincy engine. You can fire that thing up, you would hear that thing 5 miles away because it's that loud, So I decided, well, that name might fit this Fiero, So I decided to dub it the Rattler, So I had some decals made up and stuff made up for it. And out of California, and that's how that came about.
It's been the definitely, whether it's the Dells or Heartland or Fiorama, you can definitely tell when you're coming down the road with that. I mean,
it
It's
was,
definitely one. It's a sight to see, and two, it's just awesome
well,
to hear it.
well, the idea behind that is that uh, uh, if you have a car that looks like a race car, it should sound like a race car.
Hmm.
And when I use the castor oil and the gas, which I do, it smells like a race car is supposed to smell. That's all part of the image of the car, and that's how that happened.
Have you ever raced the car?
I have raced the car at Elkhart Lake a couple of times, but mostly I do it in a touring type of event. Um, that car is, in a way, with a V6 engine and the way it is now, is not as fast as you really want to be. And I've been in
Hmm.
so many fast race cars, I kind of gave up on that idea because it's just doesn't have the punch that I want for a race car, So uh, I did drive it a couple of times in some club events up here, and but nothing spectacular. So that's why I kind of got away from that part of it.
So before we kind of start closing it out here,
Yeah.
going back to when you were using it as a company car to the way the car is right now, is it
Hmm.
still just as comfortable?
Actually, yes, because I have not gained that much weight. And I fit in that car just right. My wife fits in that car just right. The seats are almost perfect as they were from the factory. We put towels down on the seats so we don't wear them out. But I've got those M&R racing belts in there,
Hmm.
and it's snug and tight, and it fits me just right when I'm driving the car. I got four-piece harnesses on those things, and it's just a comfort for me. In my height and my weight and everything else, that car is suited just perfect. So uh, I understand that a Ferrari and Lamborghinis and those cars are extra bolsters on the sides are much nicer too. But for me, it's just what I need. So that's what I've got.
There you have it. So again, before we close it out here, thank you again for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me.
And again, you say you're going to come down to Fiorama, which we're excited to say that this is our 25th anniversary,
Yes,
and
the
long
Midwest
time
Hero
running, just
Club.
like the Dells. So
Mhm.
we're excited to see you. You're always, it's always great to see you when you come down. But what do you plan to do anything else with the car, or do you consider it finished? And what else, do you want people to know? And if there's anything else about Tom Schmidt?
Well, as far as the car goes, I'm going to try to, unless something else very unusual comes up in the future, we'll probably try to preserve it the way it is right now.
That's good to
Uh,
hear. Good.
I think so because unless some unusual thing comes up that I don't know about, but with the roll bar and the NASCAR spoiler and the megaphones and the exhaust pipes and the uh, front end fascia that I got that was done by Rob Bartlett, by the way, uh, after I lost the front wing. I've got everything I think I need in the car. I just kind of hope to heck that I can keep it on the road without having any problems with it, basically. And
Yeah.
as far as the Midwest Fiero clubs go, um, when I do your show down there in Fiorama every year, I always help you people out as far as judging the best paint and the best
Yep.
display and all that. So I continue to do that. I have no problems with any of that. I like to be more active in club events, though. I like to be participating in things like judging and ballot counting and registration and parking, all that stuff. That's all part of what I like to do with it. Since the car is pretty much by itself, my wife Ann is the caretaker of the car and the crew chief, so she does most of the detailing at the shows. That gives me a chance to get around and do some other stuff for the clubs.
Yeah, and that's a nice thing, to hear this year is people getting back out. I know shows are kind of moving very slowly to bring things back, but it's just nice to start getting back out there. And I mean, it was great to see the Dells back this year and in the crowd that was there. And, look at Carlisle. I mean, holy cow, 150 cars, Fieros there. It's like these cars want to be seen. People want to show their cars. And, it's just like, you know, the back to the 80s up in Minnesota was, they had a ton of cars. So it's good to see things kind of getting back to, the shows coming back and getting cars out there and stuff like that. And
Yeah, it's. I'll give you another thing that I did for those people out there. As you well know, I had a very difficult time this past 6 months with surgeries. 447 stitches in my head as far as getting myself back to normal with the skin cancer problems and all that. And Jen Goss got a hold of that, and she published a thing in a magazine of hers, the Fiero Pride magazine. And I ended up getting over 24 get well cards from around the United States.
wow, very cool.
She did that. So for her, I decided to do this. I decided I would sponsor some of the awards for her show there, which I did. I'm sponsoring the Best in Show award there.
Nice.
I'm sponsoring the Rattler Award there. That's a special cash award that I decided to do. And that's the only time that's going to be done, more than likely, because it's the Rattler Award is a one-of-a-kind award. So I did that for her just as a thank you for all the response I got from those get well cards that I got. And
Yeah, that goes back to what I've been saying for many years and during all the podcasts too, is that the Fiero community, even though we are widely spread across the world, we're one big family, and everybody treats everybody as a family member, no matter where you are. And that's what I think separates the Fiero community from other car communities, is that we truly do care about not only our cars, but everybody who has a car just like us.
you're absolutely right. And the amount of people that we've met over the years around the United States with showing our car and going to different clubs, events, and doing these car shows, that's the key to the whole thing. It's a camaraderie that we get out of it. I know the cars are nice and all that. We have different cars. We got stock, we got non-stock and all that, but to each his own, as they say. But our car speaks for itself, like yours does, which is a very unusual car. I just love the hell out of your car, by the way. And I think one of these days we should get a picture together with those two cars because they're so unusual.
You know what? We could do one at Fiorama this year.
Yeah, you want to do that? We can do that. I'll be more than happy to do that. Those two cars are they're both unique,
Yes,
just like their owners.
exactly.
And yeah, we love the Fiero people as much as anybody else. And the compliments we get on our car, of course, are the most satisfactory thing we can speak of. And I just love continue to do it as long as our health holds out,
Yes.
So,
Yep.
and it's been great talking to you. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to show part of my stuff that I do here all these
Oh,
years.
you're welcome. Like I said,
And,
thank you for joining me on this episode. And
Yeah.
so we look forward to seeing you at shows coming up. And
Mhm.
it has been a pleasure. So thank you for joining me tonight. It's always fun talking and just kind of just shooting the chat. So
That's good. That's good. Well, thanks again, Mike, for having us, and we'll see you at Fiorama this year.
all right. That wraps up this episode of FieroCast. Again, I'm your host, Mike Croyer, and thank you for listening to the newest episode. This is episode 21, and it is the only podcast dedicated to the Pontiac Fiero. If you'd like to know more information, or if you have a future idea for a podcast, you can go ahead and email me at mkroyer@fierofocus.com. And remember to keep Fieroing. Good night, Fiero owners, wherever you are.
Good night.